Welcome to the J Sizzle Football Podcast. Today I'm going to be doing individual episodes again. I'm going to be doing an episode on one individual team. And then, of course, I'll go from there and continue with other teams. I'm going to release a schedule for you guys pretty soon here. I'm just going to get a little schedule, and I'm going to release a schedule of the days that these podcasts will be dropping and then what teams will be dropping so you can see when your favorite team is coming up. I'll post that on the Instagram after I post this podcast and I post this podcast post on Instagram. I'll do that all after that. So without further ado, let me get started. Today I'm going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. What I expect from them, I'm going to be going over, like I did with every team so far, just to give you guys a recap, I'm going to be going over their schedule, going over what I expect from them this year, additions and losses they had during the offseason, and just different things like that. So let's get started here. Obviously, we all know this this should be the last year for Big Ben. So Pittsburgh wants to send him out on a good note. We obviously know last year this team started 11-0, only to finish the season 11-5. So, we know they started really well, and they they finished 12-5. My fault, 12-5, my mistake. So they started off really well, and then ended up losing the majority of the rest of their games. They lost against Washington, they lost in Buffalo. That was a tough game. They lost in Cincinnati. They lost at Indianapolis. They lost at home, or they beat Indianapolis at home. They beat Indianapolis at home. They lost to Cleveland on the road, and then you guys know, of course, they lost to Cleveland again in the playoff game at home. So they lost to Cleveland back-to-back weeks. But here's the thing. A lot of people say this team was a fluke last year, and it's kind of hard to really tell, in my opinion, because let's look at their schedule where they started 11-0. At the New York Giants, that's not a very tough game. That should be an easy win. They won that. Denver at home. Denver had their second-string quarterback in the game, right? Cortland Sutton got hurt in the second quarter, too. Okay, you beat a good team that, has talent, but they were very injured. You beat a Houston team that was terrible last year. You beat a Philadelphia team that was not very good last year. Then you beat a Cleveland team, and that was at the beginning of the year where Cleveland was kind of, Baker was kind of struggling at the beginning of the year. The run game wasn't as good as it normally is at the beginning of the year. The defense wasn't that great. Right, Cleveland at the beginning of the year, if you guys remember, really struggled, and they didn't start picking up towards the midway part of last year. So, okay, I guess I'll give them that. That's a solid win. In Tennessee, they won. That's a solid win. In Baltimore, they won. That's a solid win. Fine. In Dallas, that's not a great win. They beat a backup quarterback, too. Cincinnati at home, that's not a good win. Jacksonville on the road, that's not a good win. Baltimore at home, they beat a second-string quarterback. Marquise Brown was out. J.K. Dobbins was out, I believe. Half the team's defense was out because of COVID. That's not really an impressive win. And then you lose to Washington, a team that's solid. You lose in Buffalo, a team that's really good. They got beat pretty good. Even though they lost by 11, Buffalo controlled the entire game. They lost in Cincinnati to a backup quarterback. They beat Indianapolis at home. That's a solid win. They lost in Cleveland. Okay, Cleveland got better towards the end of the year. They kept it close, but they lost. And then they got smoked in the playoff game against Cleveland. So, yes, while there were some solid wins in that schedule, it just felt like a lot of the wins that they had, the majority of the wins that they had were, even if they were against solid teams, it was because of the other team was very injured or this or that. And I get that. I don't want to be a guy who's out here saying, okay, they only won because of this or that or that. I don't want to be the guy who's coming up with all these excuses on why they, had a solid regular season. But at the end of the day, yes, football is a very injury-riddled sport. But when you're playing a Baltimore Ravens team with a second-string quarterback, 2 second-string receivers, and a second-string running back, and half their defense is out, and you win that game, that's not very impressive. That's not very impressive because we all know that if they would have played Baltimore again in that season, or they would have had to play Baltimore in the first round, they would have lost. Everybody knows that. That's an obvious fact. So now you come into a season where, okay, you look and you say, okay, maybe last year was a little bit of a fluke. Big Ben comes into his last year. Obviously, Big Ben played well last year, but towards the end of the year, you saw the struggles that he had because of age and his ability to not be able to literally move anymore. Right? You saw the struggles, and I'm a big fan of Big Ben. And really, I want to get this out too. I'm not trying to hate on the Steelers. I don't hate the Steelers team. I think they're a talented team who is just a couple pieces away from being legitimate contenders. I just thought last year, they talked a lot of trash, and there was a lot of chatter going around about how Pittsburgh is really good and this and that. And then when they, stepped up and they had to play big teams, they never seemed to beat any big teams. That's really what I was trying to get at when I talked about their schedule last year. So maybe last year was a fluke. Maybe it wasn't. We'll just have to, like I said, we'll have to see what happens with this team this upcoming season. One thing, though, that this team should improve on 100% is their running game. Last year, they ranked dead last in the league. They were 32nd rushing in terms of, the stat category of rushing. They ran for 84 yards a game. James Conner was the main runner. He ran for 721 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaged 4.3 carries, so didn't really play great. They had Benny Snell. He couldn't really do much. Anthony McFarland couldn't do much either. So last year, obviously, the running game struggled mightily, and this is the Steelers team. Stephen A's talked about it before. Multiple reporters have talked about it before. The Steelers, if you look at the last couple of years, even their history, really. Let's look at their history. They've always had good running backs. They were dead last year, and I think the year before they were like 29. So to keep it short, the last couple of years, they've been very bad in the running game. They haven't had any production the last 2 years in the running game. And hopefully with the draft pick of Najee Harris, they picked him late in the first round, they're hoping that he can be the guy who can turn over a leaf for them. He can be the next Le'Veon Bell, right? He can be the next guy that can really run the ball really well for this team and give Ben Roethlisberger one more solid year where he doesn't have to get back in the pocket and throw the ball 40 times a game. Because if you guys remember in that playoff game against Cleveland, he threw the ball like almost 50 times or something crazy. He literally did. Like, all they were doing is throwing the ball. I know they got down early. I get that. But even if you look at Ben Roethlisberger's stats this year, he threw the ball 600 times. That's too many times for a guy. Or look at the stats last year, 600 times. That's too many times for a guy who is at his age and at his inability to move around the pocket like he used to be able to. It's too many times for him to throw the football. So now you bring Najee Harris in. He's a power running back who should run for over 1,000 yards, no doubt. They said they're going to work him really heavy. I'm a little afraid they might overwork him, but we'll see what happens with that. As long as they work him a good amount, though, because he's a very talented running back and they need to work him a good amount to try to help Ben Roethlisberger. So when Ben Roethlisberger goes back in the pocket and makes these throws, he doesn't have so much pressure knowing he has to throw the ball on first, second, and third down every time. He can throw the ball once. Maybe only on third down, maybe twice, but he'll never have to throw the ball 3 times because he'll always run it once with Najee, because Najee Harris will be able to give him that production, and hopefully he can have a lot of 100-yard games and really help out Ben Roethlisberger. And when they get to the playoffs, they can maybe ride on Ben Roethlisberger if they do get to the playoffs, because Ben Roethlisberger will have more energy than he had last year because he threw the ball too many times last year. So that's one thing they're looking forward to. In terms of the receiving core, this is a very talented receiving core, and they're young. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. A lot of talk about him, because of the distractions that he caused last year with the dancing on the logos and stuff. I understand he talked about that being his personality, and I get that. I'm not, I don't think anybody has a problem with his personality. He's a very outgoing guy. He seems like he's a really good guy. He really does. But sometimes you have to understand, when you're on a football team, when you're when you work for an organization or you work for a business, some things just don't fly. Some things just don't work. There's certain things that even if you want to do it, and even if that's your personality, it doesn't go. You just can't do it. Dance in the locker room, dance in your free time. Maybe even you can dance on the field if you want to before the game. We don't have a problem with that, but don't dance on other teams' logos, because that's very disrespectful. It's very disrespectful, and it's kind of a sign of hey, screw you to the team you're playing. That's really what that sign is, in my opinion. I don't know if that's what he intends it to be, but that's how the opponent team looks at it. That's why guys like Von Bell, came in and Juju Smith called like a little slant route against the Bengals later in the season last year in Cincinnati. Juju danced on the logo before the game, and Von Bell came and delivered a huge hit, an absolutely huge hit. Because Von Bell said before the game, he said, we don't like that. We don't like what he's been doing to these teams, dancing on the logos. We don't appreciate that. We think it's disrespectful, so we're going to make him pay. And they made him pay in that game. Juju Smith-Schuster was, not really there in that game. He didn't do anything at all. I don't even think he even had 4 catches. I think he might have had like 2 or 3. He didn't do anything in that game. He got completely shut out. And, that just stems from the fact, because I feel like he's putting too much pressure on himself. A couple years ago, he was the most liked guy in the league, and now a lot of these players don't like him anymore because of these antics he pulled last year. So hopefully this year he stops doing that, and hopefully he just realizes that it's in the best for himself and his team. And if he can do that and stop doing all that stuff, we know Juju Smith-Schuster is a talented receiver and he can produce at a high level. But he just needs to stay focused on the game of football. For Deontay Johnson, he's my favorite receiver on this team. He's probably one of my favorite receivers in the league. I think he's very underrated. I think he's this team's number 1 receiver. As great as I just mentioned how great as Juju is and Juju can be, Deontay Johnson, in my opinion, is the best receiver on this team. Juju's probably second. Deontay Johnson, man, he went for 923 yards last year on 88 catches, had 7 touchdowns. He's really fast. He's a good route runner. He did have issues last year with dropping some balls, but towards the end of the year, he really improved. He didn't drop as many balls towards the end of the year. And he showed that he really does have good hands at the end of the year. So hopefully he can carry that into this season and the rest of his career, and he can not drop too many balls anymore. Because when he doesn't drop balls, he can really be a Pro Bowler one day. I mean, he really can. He's got that kind of potential. He's like I said, he's fast. He gets off the line really quick. He knows how to maneuver. He's got good juke moves, good spin move. He can do a little bit of everything. He just has to work on his hands a little bit. And I think you'll see his hands get really good this year, in my opinion. He'll go for over 1,000 yards, in my opinion. I think, let me go back to Juju really quick. I think Juju will probably have like 800 yards again. Probably about the same. I think Deontay Johnson will have 1,000. Chase Claypool, I think he's our number 3 receiver. But he's a very good number 3 receiver. He had a solid rookie year last year. 62 catches for 873 yards and 9 touchdowns. He showed his ability to be a go up and get it kind of guy. You throw it up to him, he's big. He'll go up and get it, right? He's got a lot of size and strength, and he's got a good vertical too, so he can go up and get anything that you throw in his area. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays this year, because he's got a lot of potential too. He's another guy, though, kind of like Juju, where you want to see him stay a little more focused sometimes on football and not focus on the other things. It seemed like at times he was talking too much trash a little bit last year, and it kind of backfired on him. Same with Juju, but like Claypool, he's talking trash about the Browns when they lost to the Browns, and Juju was talking trash to the Browns before they lost to him, and then they ended up getting killed by the Browns. So, I hope for these guys, Claypool and Juju, I hope last season was a learning experience, and I hope it showed them that, this is the NFL, and you can't just run around talking trash and, expect to win every single time. That's not how it works. If you can't back up trash talk, you don't talk trash. It's as simple as that. All right, guys like Jalen Ramsey talk trash because he can back it up. A guy like Tom Brady, if he wants to talk trash, he can talk trash because he can back it up. Stephon Diggs can talk trash because he can back it up, right? You get my point. It's not that these guys aren't. It's not that Juju and Claypool aren't good. It's just that they should not be talking as much trash as they're talking. They're talking like they're veterans and they're going to be future Hall of Famers when they're most likely not. So definitely something to keep an eye out for this year. Hopefully they, mature a little bit. That's it for the offense. Now we go to the defense. They were ranked 3rd last year in total defense, a great defense. They're led by T.J. Watt, T.J. Watt's just incredible. He had 15 sacks last year. Absolutely incredible. He gets off the line so fast. He's so quick. He's strong. He's physical. He does everything right. He's going to have another really good year, and I think he could honestly win Defensive Player of the Year this year, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. I give him one of the 3 best odds, in my opinion, to win Defensive Player of the Year. So definitely something to keep an eye out for there. In terms of their secondary, they had a lot of losses in their secondary, so this defense might take a big hit this year. Their secondary was one of the more underrated and stronger parts of this defense. Obviously, they're led by Minkah Fitzpatrick, who will obviously be returning. He's one of the better safeties in the league. It's going to be good for them to have him back. You lost two big corners that really helped your team last year. They gave your cornerback spot depth, and they also played a lot of snaps at the starter spot. You lost Mike Hilton, great corner. He played mainly in the slot, but he was great for this team last year. Young, too, has a lot of potential. And then you lost Steven Nelson, who's solid, too. So you lost 2 solid corners, right? So at the cornerback spot, you still have Joe Hayden, who's solid, but he's getting to that age where you got to wonder if he can still produce at a high level. Last year he played very well, but a lot of people don't think he'll play as well this year because his age is starting to get up there. And, towards the end of the year last year, as great as he played, you could see his stamina kind of wearing out towards the end of the year just because of his age. So he'll be playing alongside Cameron Sutton, who's shown a little bit of potential, has a little bit of experience, but you want to see him have more experience than he's had. He hasn't really played a lot of starter snaps recently, especially last year he didn't. So let's see. Let's see what happens with Cameron Sutton. I think he does have a little bit of potential. But I don't know. Still losing, who they lost at the cornerback spot is not going to help because those were 2 big corners for this team, Like Mike Hilton was a key piece to this team's defense last year in the slot. He guarded slot receivers the whole time, and he did great on slot receivers if you go look at his, Pro Football Focus grade and his stats, right? And then you also lost Steven Nelson, who was good on the outside. He was playing alongside Joe Hayden, and he would really help a lot, with this defense on other big receivers. So let's see. It's going to be interesting, the secondary for sure. At the other safety spot, alongside Minkah, you have Terrell Edmonds, who's, still a very solid safety in my opinion. That's fine there. So the safety core is good. Your cornerback spot could use a little work, though, because you lost 2 main guys. So got to keep an eye on that one. I think overall, though, as much as I talked about the cornerback losses, I think the biggest loss was Bud Dupree at the linebacker spot. Bud Dupree, I know he signed with the Titans. He had 8 sacks last year. So that's a big production guy to lose. And in the last 2 seasons, he got 19 and a half sacks. That's going to hurt. That's going to hurt a lot. That's not the kind of loss that they wanted to have. But, and it seems like when I'm looking at the additions that they had, it doesn't seem like they really replaced any of these, losses defensively with good defensive players. They really didn't even add that many defensive players. I know they added Kalen Ballage on offense. They added Dwayne Haskins at quarterback. They added B.J. Finley at the center spot. But, this is a team that really didn't add anything defensively with all their losses. So they were third last year defensively. I think they'll be like 18th defensively this year, personally. Even if T.J. Watt wins Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, you have a solid D-line that can get to the quarterback, but you don't have any sort of secondary, really, other than Minka and Terrell Edmonds. Okay, that's fine, but your cornerbacks are going to get burnt and beat a lot, which is going to cause an issue. I mean, you saw in the past couple of years, look at the Eagles. The Eagles have had pretty solid safeties in the last couple of years, right? But look at how much they've struggled at their cornerback spot, and look how many yards are throwing on them, even when they go and they play zone. If your corners can't stay with guys one-on-one, they're going to get beat. And the safety can only do so much. They're going to get beat. Teams will find schemes around, what other teams have. If the Steelers have 2 strong safeties, as great as Minka and Terrell Edmonds are, when teams play the Steelers, they'll find schemes around that and go right at the corners all game. And they'll attack the corners all game and win most of their matchups. That's a problem for the Steelers team going into this season. They go ahead and go over the schedule for this team. Another problem, really quick, I finished the defensive side of the ball. I want to go back to the offensive side really quick before I look at the schedule and give you guys a prediction. The offensive line is really going to struggle this year. They lost a lot of guys on their offensive line this season. A ton of guys. They lost Gerald Hawkins. They lost Danny Isadora. They lost Marquise Pouncey. This offense, they lost Alejandro Villanueva. This offensive line is really going to struggle this season. They're really going to struggle. Because they lost a lot of their core guys. And their offensive line was solid last year, but they lost a lot of their core guys. And, you have to wonder how that's going to affect this team going into this season. So that's something to keep an eye out on too, for sure. So on to the schedule. They open up in Buffalo. I think they'll lose that. Week 2 against Vegas, I think they win. Week 3 against Cincinnati, they win. Puts them at 2-1. Green Bay, I think they'll lose 2-2 because they're in Green Bay. Denver at home, I think they'll lose 2-3. Seattle at home, I think they'll lose 2-4. Then they have a bye week. Then they go into Cleveland. I think they'll go 2-5. Chicago at home, I think they'll lose that 2-6. Detroit at home, I think they'll win that 3-6. Chargers on the road 3-7. Cincinnati on the road 3-8. Baltimore at home, I bet they split with Baltimore. I'll say 4-8. In Minnesota, I think they'll get a win there, 5-8. Tennessee at home 5-9. In Kansas City 5-10. Cleveland at home 6-10. And then in Baltimore 6-11. So you finish the season 6-11, which means obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion, from what I'm looking at, will not make the playoffs. They have a tough schedule. They're in a tough division. Cincinnati gets Joe Burrow back this year. If you guys didn't check out the Cincinnati podcast, go check it out. I uploaded it a couple days ago. Cleveland, obviously, we know how strong they were last year. They're going to be even stronger this year. They added a lot of pieces on defense. They filled a lot of their holes defensively that they had last year. Baltimore's going to be really good again. They got Lamar Jackson a solid receiver, and Rashad Bateman, who should be really good. So finally, Lamar has somebody to throw the ball to consistently. So no, I mean this division is very strong. It's very strong, and for a team in Pittsburgh who showed a lot of digression towards the end of the year last year, it's not a good sign in my opinion. So I think 6-11, no playoff berth for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Big Ben will retire after this season, of course. Big Ben's had an incredible career, so a big shout out to him. He's a Hall of Famer for sure. He's a lot of accolades he's accomplished in his career, and it's really been a joy being able to watch Ben Roethlisberger. So hopefully, I'm thinking 6-11, but hopefully Pittsburgh maybe can, let them go out on a brighter note than 6-11. But looking at this schedule and looking at where this team is compared to other teams in the division, I don't see anything better than 6-11 in my opinion. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Give me your Steelers record prediction in the comments. Let me know what you think. I want to hear everybody's opinion. Because I know some people are going to say 11-6. I know some people are going to say, 10-7. So I just want to see what people think. And we can go from there. We can continue to debate about the Pittsburgh Steelers because they're going to be one of the more interesting teams to keep an eye out for this year. Because last year, a lot of people thought they were a fluke. So let's see this year if they're the real deal or not. So that's going to wrap it up for the podcast. Make sure you guys go like and subscribe to these videos. Go check out the Instagram page. If you guys enjoyed today's podcast, have a good one.